Good evening and welcome to tonight's Candidate Spotlight. My name is Jimmy Malloy and I will be your host for this evening. Our goal tonight is to give you, the voter, an opportunity to meet a local political candidate who's asking for your vote and hear them answer a variety of questions asked by both me and you. So the format for tonight's event will be simple. The first half an hour or so will be a one-on-one interview with myself designed to introduce you to the candidate and hear their position on a number of different issues. Then the second half of this evening, we turn it over to you. The questions will come from you from the comments section. Now feel free to post your questions in the comments section at any time throughout this interview. I only ask that you follow two rules. The first rule is that you keep it PG. We don't want any profanity or vulgarity in the questions that come through here. The second rule is that you keep it respectful. This isn't a time or a place for personal attacks. We do ask you, feel free to ask tough questions, but do so in a respectful manner. Now, it should be noted that every active candidate for the VUSD school board was invited to participate in these candidate spotlights. But as of right now, this moment, only 4 have accepted. Now, these 4 are Paul Belt, who we're going to be hearing from here tonight. We've got Jesse Perez, who's from Area 1. He will be joining us on Sunday night. We've also got Janelle Murphy from Area 6. She'll be joining us on Monday night, October 3rd. And then finally, Crystal Reynolds from Area 4, who will be joining us a week from tonight, next Thursday on the 6th. So I'm going to let that run and loop just a little bit so you can grab those dates if you need to know. But we will have those 4 joining us. And I'll say this, if you do like and enjoy what you're hearing here tonight, if you like the format, being able to hear from the different candidates in more of a lengthy interview, something that you can go back to and watch. If you want to hear from some of the others that maybe these guys are running against, I would ask you to reach out to them and just encourage them to accept the offer to come in and do the candidate spotlight. So with all that being said, I think we're going to go ahead and get started here. Tonight, my guest is Mr. Paul Belt, and he is running for Area 2. And you might ask yourself, where in the world is Area 2? I didn't even know that Visalia had areas, right? So Area 2, I'm going to share this thing. This is a map of the Visalia districts. You can see Area 2 is the one here in the blue. It's kind of the northeast portion, and Paul might tell us, shed a little bit more light on the exact areas that he is looking to represent, kind of in the old Golden West, or in the Golden West area up in northeast Visalia. So all of that area here around St. John's Parkway, Houston, east of Santa Fe, all the way up even to Ivanhoe. And, this area kind of in the county that is represented by VUSD. So it's a big geographic area with a lot of concentration up in that northeast Visalia portion. So if you find yourself in that area, Paul is somebody who's going to be asking for your vote. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on Mr. Paul Belt. How are you, Paul?
Hey.
Good to have you here with us tonight. So we have a little bit of feedback issue, and I think we're going to try to control it the best that we can. You can hear me and Paul's speakers, so bear with us just a little bit when it comes to that. But Paul, why don't we start? I want to, before we really get into this thing, if people want to contact you outside of this, can you give them a direction? Do you have a website or anything like that they can go to?
Yes, I have a website that I enjoyed building because it has a lot of my heart in it as well. But it's not real simple. You have to think it out. I made it be the name of my political campaign committee. I thought that's what I was supposed to do. And so it goes like this: Belt of Truth 2022 Board. So .org. It's a nonprofit. So the idea is, obviously it has to have the candidate's name, Belt. It has to have the year that you're running, It's supposed to also involve at least an abbreviation of what the position is that you're running for. So that's why I wanted a little more than just Belt 2022 board. So I put Belt of Truth,
Yeah.
2022board.org.
Okay. Sounds good. So I put that up on the ticker along the bottom here. So for any of you who are viewing now or later, you can see the website and also an email address here if you want to, maybe your question didn't get answered. We're going to have people who are on here live. We're going to have the opportunity to ask questions, but we're also going to probably have people who watch this later who won't be able to do the live part of it. So if you have a question for Paul that didn't get asked, or maybe you want to contact him about whatever reason, you can utilize those resources. Or if you want to donate or any of those types of things, you can reach him on the info. He'll be going along the clicker through most of this interview. Right on. Okay, should we get started?
Certainly, yeah.
Excellent. Well, let's just take the first few minutes here. And I just want, from your own words, you to describe to us, who is Paul Belt? Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience?
Well, it's fascinating when I think about elections. I've only run for 3 elections, and the first 2 were in my teenage years. I ran for student body president of my junior high, now we call them middle schools, and was elected student body president of my middle school. And then 4 years later, I ran for student body president of my high school, and I became student body president of Coalinga High School. And that's where I grew up. The third election I ran for was band booster president, but there weren't any other nominees, so the whole group said yay, and I did that for 4 years, longer than I had planned. And this is my first real venture as an adult into the world of elections. I've been very active in voting in elections. I've been a poll watcher. I've worked the polls, but I've never actually run as a candidate, and it's been quite eye-opening already. And just we started in August 9th was the date that we had to turn in all of our papers and started this whole journey. But a little bit about me: I grew up in the Valley. I'm a Valley boy, I'd like to say born and raised, but honestly, I was born in West Virginia. I don't remember it. We left when I was 2, but my mother's family was from Coalinga, and that's how we ended up back in Coalinga. And for the most part, I've lived most of my 66 years right here in California. I've raised my 4 sons with my amazing wife of 44 years. 2 of them were born in Chico. That's where we met when I was going to college. I met an amazing woman in Chico State. That's where I finished school, and we started our family. I was a youth pastor in Chico at First Assembly in Chico for 6 years. I did everything backwards, though. I didn't go to Bible college. I was in the business world right out of college. I was a psychology major, and my degree is worth about what the letters stand for. And my wife and I began with being involved in a church, and they said, hey, how can we serve? And they said, well, we need junior high Sunday school teachers. Sure. We fell in love with those junior hires. It was kind of crazy that they would throw us in there. But in a very short amount of time, we realized there were specific needs for junior hires that couldn't be addressed with high school and college age students. And the youth group there at that little church were all those ages, 12 to 22. So we went to the youth pastor and said, wow, Ron, can we start a junior high youth group? He goes, man, go for it. I don't have time to do it. Run with it. I enlisted 6 couples, and we started a Friday night gathering for junior hires, specifically to not be around older teenagers, to deal with life, to meet across the street from the church in a multi-purpose building of a school that rented it to us for $1 a year. They don't do that anymore. Right. And it blew up. We called it Friday Night Alive. Because these young teenagers had a connection with adults. We had 150 junior hires within a year, and it, like I said, it blew up. So soon after that, the church board asked if I would like to be the youth pastor, and the youth pastor moved into another position, and I continued on for another 5 years there. We moved from Chico to Visalia after our first 2 boys were born. And our second 2 sons were born here in Visalia. We thought we'd be here temporarily, and we've been here since 1984. So 38 years ago, And for the last 37 years, I've had some kind of involvement with Visalia Unified School District, whether it be, well, the first movement was when I started working with Youth for Christ. Like I said, I was here temporarily. I didn't know what I was going to do. And I was asked to take on the position of the local ministry director, later became the executive director within just a few months. And I did that for 15 years. But the very first day I walked on Mount Whitney campus as the new campus life guy, I introduced myself to the principal, and he introduced me to all of his staff and a counselor. And this one particular counselor said, "Hey, you might want to stay around and see what I'm doing. I've been doing a divorce recovery group for the last 2 years, and I think you might be interested in it." I said, "Sure." So I stayed. I was totally enamored with a group of 15 high school students who came together to share about life. Their common denominator, they all came from a family of divorce. And they found out that they weren't the only ones dealing with so many different life issues, and they would share with each other, support one another. A couple of weeks later, that counselor asked me when I was coming back. I didn't know I was going to be able to come back. He said, yeah. So he grafted me in to learn about how to do this and to be an assistant with him. And then later went to the school district office and said, "Can we have this minister guy as a volunteer to help do these recovery groups so that we can get more of them?" And I kept that letter for many, many years. They said, we'd have more problems discriminating against this volunteer due to the position that he's a minister out in the public. As long as I wasn't grandstanding, soapboxing, proselytizing, I was there to help young people connect and young people to have an opportunity to deal with life. I did that for 13 years, every week, every Wednesday. At the end, I had 5 groups. I had over 120 kids that I was involved with every week, talk about life, dealing with the effects of divorce on their life. I had a radio show that evolved in the middle of all that. I did that for 6.5 years on the new Christian station in town called KDOV. And I was a talk show host for 6.5 years where we did this. And you can tell I have a voice. Maybe I have a face for radio, but I have a voice for radio. And sure. I actually enjoyed engaging teenagers and their parents to talk about life. And it all related back to what the Bible said about their life, but it was real. It was dynamic. It was amazing. 5,000 listeners around the valley had no idea who they might be. And yet it was very life engaging. Like I said, I was with Youth for Christ for 15 years. And shortly after that, I pastored a church for 5 years. Just about wore me out. And then I was an associate pastor to 2 other churches here in town. And altogether, I did 30 years of some kind of Christian ministry. And shortly after that, I became a quality control manager for a cabinet company in the construction business. That was quite fascinating. For a year, I went from Visalia to Bakersfield, checking on cabinets, running a crew, actually 6 installation crews, 6 employees of our own, another 10 who did work for us. And I ran a multi-million-dollar company for a year until the master brand cabinets said we could probably do this cheaper, which wasn't true. Since then, I've actually done several different things. I've worked both in schools and outside of schools. I work with COS. I'm an adjunct there where I do training. My main course is called Supervisory Academy. I remind adults how to treat one another. I've also, again, because of my 4 sons, had a lot of involvement with their schooling. We homeschooled for a number of years and then put them in school about middle school and high school. Like I said earlier, I was a Band Booster president for 4 years, involved in so many choir trips and band trips and drama productions and all that goes with that, involved with our students, our high school students in many ways. But starting 25 years ago, I would speak, and I still do, every semester in health science classes where I talk about the effects of divorce on teenagers, preparing for marriage, and what dating does to not prepare you well for marriage. And I step on their toes and tell them what love really is and try to give them some, well, it was gray, now white hair wisdom of don't make the same mistakes as I did. So I have a heart for Visalia Unified. And I've been, like I said, actively involved. I even was on a committee many, many years ago. It was called the Family Life Curriculum Committee, we advise the school board on appropriate curriculum and documentation and things to use, materials for the family life curriculum for sex education. I was on that committee for almost 10 years. Those kind of committees, I think, need to still be solicited and drawn. And it sounds like the new superintendent wants to do more of that, which I applaud. So I find myself here. Do I need this? I don't need this. I am semi-retired. Started drawing my Social Security here a few months ago, 5 months ago. My number one job is to support my third grade teacher wife to stay teaching until she reaches her 20 years, where she has our retirement that's really of any value. I forgot to mention, though, for 13 years, we did an after-school program called Drama Club at her elementary school that culminated in a musical every spring. Hundreds of young people, elementary school kids, 3rd through 6th grade we worked with, and now many of them have not only graduated, but they're adults, and we see them all over the place.
So you may be a political newcomer here, but you've been involved with VUSD in a variety of ways, it sounds like, for a long time.
Very much.
So your opponent is actually board president Juan Guerrero, right? You're running against Mr. Guerrero, and he served on this board in that capacity for a long time. I guess my question to you would be, what has he done or not done that makes you believe it's time for change? In other words, why are you running for VUSD board at this moment?
There is a dynamic, Jimmy, that you've mentioned as to why I'm running against a person that's been on the board on and off 20 years, 16 consecutive at this point. The last 2 elections, he's run unopposed. The last time anyone voted for him was 12 years ago. That's a long time. So my number one thing, I'm looking to do this for 4 years, 1 term. Matter of fact, I may introduce the idea that we have term limits. It doesn't seem reasonable that someone makes a career out of being on the school board. It should be a policy-making body that includes many people over any length of time. Why am I running? It's not just to unseat him. I like him. He's a nice guy. But what I have seen recently, particularly the last 2.5 years, 3 years, is a lack of action by the part of the school board. They are supposed to be the policy setters. Superintendent carries out that policy in systems and in programs, but ultimately the buck stops, if you will, with the school board. And it seems like they're rather lethargic. They haven't really engaged things. Anytime I've gone to address them on things, I rarely get feedback. I think that's a misunderstanding about what the Brown Act is all about. The Brown Act was supposed to protect any of us, the electors, from the elected meeting in private, meeting in silence, doing backroom deals. They're supposed to be transparent and right there in front of us and let us see things. So this board and the president, who directs a lot of those kind of procedures, has put a lid on what kind of input the community, particularly parents, can have or will have to the board. In a case in point, you've seen it too, the comments. He reads a spiel at the beginning of every public comment section in the evening's board meeting, and he actually says that there won't be any discussion on anything brought up that's not on the agenda for the evening. Well, the Brown Act that I've read says a limited discussion may be made when new things are brought up, either essential activities or policies or events or things that need to be attended to. And that, yes, it would be short in length, maybe to actually have a staff make a report or look into things and report back to them, but no response, sitting there stoically as if I can't blink because I don't want to make anyone know that I might be in favor or not. That is not what the Brown Act is all about. The Brown Act is supposed to be transparency where dialogue happens. I have not seen a lot of dialogue. I've seen a behind the desk, you listen to me, I'm going to pound the mallet when you're out of order. It's not give and take, even by emails. And I hear that from lots of people who have sent emails. One of the things I want to do, I'm going to actually have a newsletter I know it sounds like, oh, great, another task. I'm going to have a monthly newsletter that actually expresses what is engaging, what's going back and forth, what's being worked on. What we don't have that kind of give and take, transparency, and interest. I also think that it can't all be done with social media, and well, actually, the person I'm running against doesn't have any social media. He won't see this unless somebody shows it to him. But social media is a town square of today. It needs to have dialogue and it needs to be attended to, but it's not the whole thing. We need to have face-to-face interaction, opportunity for people to make some input. So that's the reason I'm running. I don't think we have input, and I want to give grandparents, parents, input to the school board.
So you mentioned a newsletter. How would that look different if Paul Belt's elected from what they're experiencing now?
Well, there are some new communication things that have just come to bear recently, as the new superintendent has hired an entire media team. So that's exciting. He might get some things going. There's going to be, but it's usually, how can I say, packaged. I know how to package things. It can't be just packaged. It needs to be very in progress. Things that are, this is what we're working on. So to me, the newsletter wouldn't be, here's all the things we've done, and I pat myself on the back. It needs to be, what do you think about this? Here's what we're thinking about. This is what we're working on. What can we gain from the community? What can we gain from more parent input? What can we gain from students? To actually make a two-way street, if you will, a real interaction, and being very real and honest. It's not photo ops. It's not about, oh, don't we look great? No, it's about, these are real issues, real problems. How do we deal with them?
So you're talking about something that's not just informative, but it's actually inviting people to participate in the process?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Very good. Very good. So I was thinking about just boards in general, or groups of leaders or whatever. And if I'm putting together a board, whether it's a school board or a ministry board or a business board or whatever, one of the things that I'm looking for is diversity, right? Diversity of thought, diversity of backgrounds, experiences, opinions, like all of those kind of things. I think to have a board that is, all the same, not be beneficial to anybody, right? So you want to see that diversity. So my question for you, Paul, is what is unique about maybe your experience, your perspective that you would bring to this board?
Well, one would be that I've, other than some very small ways, I've not worked for the Visalia Unified School District. I worked 1 year as a computer tech. Other than that, I've never really been paid by Visalia Unified. So I think that's a unique thing, that I'm not a former employee. I'm not a union member or gaining retirement from a union anywhere. Those seem to be a little bit of conflicts, not so much in the here and now, but in the future or in the process of things, that because I have that somehow connection, I have to watch out for vested interests. I'm a 66-year-old who's never done this before. I'm not looking for a career past this even. I just want to give the input. And it's going to be white hair input. It's going to be, yes, baby boomer input. It's not going to, so I give some age to it. Also as a 37-year volunteer in and around the school district.
Uh-oh. Just froze up on me, Paul. Are you, can you still hear me? Because your screen just froze.
I think I bring fresh.
There you are.
It came back. There we go. Technology. It's amazing.
Okay.
Yeah. My wife is yelling in the other room, "You froze." Yep, we're on it.
Okay. We're back live now. Finish your thought.
So as a community member, as someone who has just worked in and around the school district but not really inside of it, there are things that I think I bring a fresh set of eyes to. To me, it's a big deal when we talk about spending $1.9 million on a tutoring program. I realize I've never had $1.29 million, but I think I bring a whole wow, do we really need to have something online to fix what has caused the problem because we were online for over a year? I have some. I had questions about that, and I presented it to the board, and they still spent the money. But and hopefully, it really will bolster for what teachers are trying to help in catching students up from literally a 2-year gap. They are behind. I've watched my third grade teacher wife see some remarkable improvements, quick growth in students in this last year of actually being in person. So it is hopeful. But I think I bring very much a whole new set of eyes as to what the norms are, how things are run. One of the things is it came up. It came up in May. The accountant of the school board, what they call him accountant, the finance guy, comes to the school board and says, "Hey, I have good news. We've saved $500,000." And the question what he answered for himself, because he didn't wait for the answer or the question. He just said, "And how we did it is we didn't fill 4 positions in the district office, and we gave their tasks to others. We saved $500,000 by accident," is what I would add. So I have a whole different perspective. You saved $500,000 by accident? Then what kind of money could be saved? Better used, better spent. This is not their money. This is taxpayers' money. How could it be? Well, that's another problem. A lot of federal and state monies have just flown in, and so they don't feel like, oh, there's no end to the spigot. They just keeps printing money. No, we have to be.
I think we froze up again. We're going to give it a second. Last time it came right back, so.
Reasonable about what we're doing and how
we're back. We're good.
Here it comes. It just came back.
Okay.
What's happening? Why is it freezing? Let me make sure my connection is good.
Well, I'm going to take just a second. I want to just encourage people who are in the chat rooms to go ahead and just start putting questions in there. You don't have to wait for the Q&A section in this thing. We're going to ask a few more questions. We can tell Paul's a preacher. We're giving some good long answers for me. But I have a number of questions that I'll fill in the gaps with, but I do want to hear from those who are on here. And so if you do have a question, definitely throw it out there. And you can do that even now. You don't have to wait. But until I start seeing questions, I'm just going to keep going with mine. So I think I've figured out the feedback situation, Paul. I'm going to be muting you while I'm speaking, so we're not hearing through your speakers, and then I'll unmute you when I get done. So I have another question here. Doing the right thing is not always easy and can oftentimes be unpopular. Can you describe for us a time when you've had to stand on principle and it meant you had to stand alone?
Wow. That's a good question.
Good question, right?
One of the most recent ones was 2 years ago, July of 2020. I came to a clear place that churches need to be meeting. And the church I was attending was still, and with no end in sight, was going to be all online on YouTube. And so I had to make a choice. It meant leaving friends and family that I've been with for that church 12 years. It's not against the leadership of the church. It's not against the church. It's just I felt like principle. It is a basic right in the United States to practice your religion, to have your churches meet, and we were shutting them down. Some of them haven't recovered from that. Others flourished, which is amazing. I don't understand all the dynamics, but it had a cost for us, and we ended up going to another church that stayed open, was open, and we plugged in. It said we're going to be a part of this, and now we're there, and we don't plan on leaving. We plan on investing ourselves with them and those people. Another time I remember, wow, I don't know why I'm thinking about this, but it's related to schools. Remember when the lottery was first put forth as an election item? The state of California voters had to okay the lottery to allow that the funds of the lottery, it was going to go to schools. That's how they sold it. And I voted against it. I voted against it because I didn't think, one, it was a good idea to for the state and for education to be connected to something that I saw as, for a lot of people, out of control, unhealthy, a waste of money and energies. I realize you can play lottery and be safe with it. I just saw a lot of gambling excesses and actually addictions. And so I voted against it. I've never bought a lottery ticket because out of principle, I said, no, I'm not voting for it. I'm not for it. I'm not going to participate in it. And so to this day, I've never bought one. That doesn't mean it's wrong for other people to do so. It can be a form of entertainment if you set aside your entertainment budget, and you might every now and then make some money back. But those are two large ones that were, actually what society standing, culture standing at that point, I guess.
Gotcha. So you mentioned earlier that you've been in Christian ministry for a good portion of your life. How do you see that faith guiding you in this position on the board?
Another good question, Jimmy. Well, I believe that you believe in something. Everyone believes in something. And to me, my Christian faith is a foundation by which I make all decisions. How I treat fellow man, how I care for others, how I see that I am not better than anyone else. It doesn't make me feel like I'm somehow higher. No, my Christian faith has taught me that we're all beggars here. We're all in the same place. But when you come from a place of knowing who you are and where you stand and how you're loved and able to love others, it becomes a foundation for all the decisions. And one of those things have been literally how you expect to express what you believe. I never, ever have forced that on somebody else, and I never will. I will dialogue. I will ask questions. I don't mind being known as a Christian on the school board. It's one, a nonpartisan position, but it's also non-sectarian. and people are afraid of, the division between church and state. No, the division between church and state was clearly established for the state to not interfere with the church. Not that church members, which is people, couldn't be involved with the state.
Right.
We give influence wherever we are. And so I would think that most people would hope and would see that the influence that I would bring would not just because of my age, but because of my background and my foundational beliefs. Matter of fact, that's part of why I've even said what my platform is: breaking down barriers.
So what would you say then, Paul, to the parent that you might represent if you're elected, who would say that, faith has no place in public education and that needs to stay out of the boardroom?
Well, this might surprise them because you know what? I'd like to see that the boardroom starts every board meeting with a prayer. They used to. It would not be necessarily from a board member, perhaps. It could be from outside community members, a rotating basis of people who come and pray before a meeting. I'm not afraid of that. Yesterday morning was See You at the Poll, and thousands of teenagers around California, actually millions around the world, gathered at their school site to pray for their schools and for the opportunity to bring love and light into their school. And it's not praying against, it's praying for. I also think, though, that clearly you're not going to say, here's the Bible, you must teach it in the class. It's not going to be taught. I'm not pushing for that. But the freedom for teachers to have a Bible is certainly guaranteed by the Constitution. The freedom for people to share their faith one to another of all faiths is guaranteed in the Constitution. Matter of fact, I should bring this up. One of the most endearing relationships that my wife and I had in the 13 years of doing that after-school drama program was with a Muslim family. And last Friday night, their oldest who was a senior at Mount Whitney. We were at the homecoming game where Hiba was one of the princesses, or to be considered a queen. You know, they had a king and queen of the homecoming. She was up for election for that. When my wife addressed her mom and said, we were so excited to see that, her mom, in her full hijab, oh, a gold one too, man, it sparkled, it shined, said to my wife, we love you. This Muslim woman has seen our caring for them and for their children. Debbie taught several of them in her class, the 5 of them, but 2 of the 5. We had them in our drama program. They don't see a problem that we're white Christians and they're Arabic, they speak Arabic Muslims. No, we're inclusive of one another and it's not a problem. It should be that way with every faith and in the school board room. It's not something we go, oh, we got to keep them out. They're crazy Christians.
Gotcha. So we do have a question that's here from the comments here. I'm going to see if I can get it up on the screen. Boom, there it is. Look at how fancy we are. Okay, so this one comes from Melissa Brewer, and I'm going to throw this out there for Facebook users. The platform that we use will just identify you as Facebook user. So if you do ask a question from Facebook and it doesn't pop up your name, that's not because I'm trying to keep it from anybody. That's just the way that this works. So in this case, this one came from YouTube and from Melissa Brewer. And the question is, the last 2 school board meetings, parents, including you, have asked for a fentanyl response plan from VUSD. Has VUSD provided a sufficient response as of the time of this interview?
Thank you for that question, Melissa. Actually, I got 2 words from the initial email that I sent 2 weeks ago. They were thank you from one school board member. I've heard nothing from any of the other school board members or the superintendent at what I've proposed. What I proposed, and I said it again Tuesday night, is that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when fentanyl is exposed on a campus in Visalia, one of the 27 schools. We may have the same situation that Bakersfield had just 2 weeks ago when a yard duty staff just inhaled a whiff from the backpack of the student that had 500 fentanyl tablets with him, and she overdosed. And it was because a police officer had his Narcan nearby, gave her the injection, saved her life. And so what I've told to the school board, do it now. Don't wait till someone dies. I got a little impassioned about it because it's something you can be proactive with. You don't have to wait. I talked to the police liaison for our campus police that we have from Visalia PD, that they roam. They're not on every campus all the time. They go between the high school and middle school, and they check in on elementary schools on occasion. I said, do you guys have Narcan? Oh yeah, every officer does. So that's a help. We know the officers have them. Every nurse, every office at every campus should have Narcan available. It will save lives.
Do you know whether they do or they don't? Has that question been answered?
They won't answer me. I don't know. I have to assume they don't. In my experience of I shouldn't bring her into this too much. My teacher wife that I know of, they don't have it at their campus. And fentanyl is a big deal. It is dangerous. It's here. We just recently had thousands of pills that were confiscated. Remember this arrest that happened here in Tulare County. So it's, like I said, it is something that we can get ahead of and make sure we're prepared for. How to stop the fentanyl itself, that's a whole nother ballgame. We need a lot more proactive events and what do you want to call it? Education for parents and students to know this is bad stuff. There's no reason to be trying fentanyl. Go drink a Red Bull, and you'll have a much healthier high.
So that kind of segues into a similar type question, and thank you, Melissa. That was a fantastic question. Keep them coming in the comments section. I'll as soon as I see them and we have a pause, I'll get to them. But along similar lines, I think of fentanyl and the response to all of that under the category of student safety, right? So student safety is a big deal. And whether it's fentanyl, whether it's, other drugs coming on campus, whether it's gangs and fights and bullying, or whether it's, active shooter threats or things like that. There are a lot of things, and it's on the forefront of a lot of parents' minds because we see it in the news all the time. And a lot of people, at least in my lifetime, more than I've ever seen, are they're nervous about whether or not school is a safe place for their kids. So as a board director, as a trustee on Visalia Unified Board, what can be done on the district level to ensure parents the school actually is a safe place to bring their kids?
Great point. You mean putting trust back into trustee? That's a side thing. I asked the sheriff, the Tulare County Sheriff, Mike Boudreau, just a couple of weeks ago. He hasn't gotten back to me because he's doing a little more research. I asked, well, why is it that we haven't already encouraged an armed guard, if you will? My idea would be we have a lot of vets who are already trained, know how to deal with firearms, and would love a part-time position or volunteer, either one. But one at every campus, armed, so that the crazies who want to go to a gun-free zone would know it's not gun-free, that it's not open season. Now, what we're looking into is the letter of the law, if you will, that there's a reason that there was this decree by the state of California that schools were gun-free zones. Now, the gun-free zone idea was supposed to be what? Students don't pack. Students don't have guns. And yet every now and then we hear of one. Melissa even mentioned years ago how there was a gun on her campus when she was much, much younger, going to school in Visalia. Weapons are found readily. I'm surprised at two things. Why we have corralled, if you will, and narrowed entrances to every campus in Visalia Unified, all 27 of them. There's one gate you have to come in and out. They've tried to really police that better. Why aren't there metal detectors at every entrance? It seems like a real simple thing. If you want to make sure that weapons are not coming on to campus, why aren't there metal detectors? There are metal detectors at Ross and at every airport, of course, but in a lot of public buildings, every courthouse, every county office, there are metal detectors. Tulare County Department of Ed has a metal detector. I think Visalia Unified might at its district office. Why don't every campus have one installed? That would be very small but very reasonable idea. The next thing, of course, is that armed person, ready and able. There are other things too that it appears that gangs have gotten a lot more sophisticated in how they hide who they are and what they're about. It was pretty simple when it was just two main colors or three main colors. But we still need to work very diligently at curbing gang affiliation, actually instructing and encouraging young people that, that what you feel a drawing in a gang is what you're missing in other connections. So we need to help you gain better connections. That's not a healthy one. But we also need to actually and several parents mentioned it Tuesday night, and it's stirring, and that is that, of course, these little devices help us see more readily what's happening when they're filming filming movies. Maybe they're acting. When they're filming actual fights and everybody sees it. But you don't overreact by saying, well, it's just because of the devices. It's just because of social media. Social media doesn't make students fight each other. They're fighting each other. They're just now posting it a lot, and we're seeing it more available. It's not that it's for the camera. So it's not the social media that's driving kids, students, anger, and taking out. What's driving it is a myriad of elements. Now, here's a good thing. I didn't know this till just recently. My wife has let me know that there have been stepping up of monies and positions. At her elementary school, there's not only a school psychologist, there's now a counselor, full-time. She's under the psychologist, but her job is to do just that, is to look for students who are having difficulty and engage them. She came into my wife's classroom today and gave a tremendous presentation about how different students learn differently. And so the students, third graders, were encouraged to go, oh, you learn like that. I learn like this. What happens? They begin to actually see each other as they are. It's what I teach in my supervisory academy. I teach personalities, colors, so that managers can understand, you know what? The reason you say, oh, that knucklehead, is because they look at things differently than you do. If you understand how they look at the world, how they perceive things, and then begin to manage them through their eyes in the things that they're attracted by and have a affinity for, then we all will get things done better. That's what I bring to the board, by the way. I teach conflict resolution. I teach navigating difficulties. I teach communication skills and communication concepts. That's what I've been doing the last 3 years. That's a little side note. But again, the school, because a lot of extra monies that have come in, are beginning to address the need, the real need. We've had such a disconnect for the last 2.5, almost 3 years, that we're having to pay attention to it. Social emotional learning is one of those things. We need to be careful that it's not social emotional cultural learning or reconstruction by way of social emotional. Those are things that I really will look out for and watch. It needs to be very clearly addressing students' needs, not bringing some new ideas that they don't need. The reality is safety has to be constantly ever present. And it's not just throwing money, it's looking at the whole campus, it's looking at the whole family dynamic, and realizing we need to keep addressing.
So we do have another question from the comments section. I'm going to go ahead and pop it up here. This one is from Lori Messia. Says, Paul, what would you propose to do with the $70 million in unassigned Measure A bonds? So you get to make the decision, and it's all yours.
Well, from what I understand, Lori, from this bond measure that was passed a few years ago now, originally it was designed, it had two main components. The big one was a fifth high school for Visalia Unified. But also the idea was it was going to actually get matching funds from the state, because it was going to take about $140 million to build a new high school. And the state said, well, we'll give you 20-30 million. And it was not anywhere close. So they had to backtrack, and they have not actually sold all the $70 million worth of bonds, my understanding is, so far. They've sold some, and they've held back because they didn't have the project. I heard the board meeting just this last Tuesday night, a board member, defend, well, we won't sell those bonds, and we won't use that money for anything else until we come back to the community. I think that horse left the barn. The vote was already happened. It already was approved for specific needs. It did include modernization. It did include some upgrades for classrooms and school sites. But the majority of it was supposed to go for a high school. Here's the sticky wicket. I don't think we need another high school. Our enrollment has not been climbing. It's actually been going down for several years, not just from the pandemic, not just from parents upset and going, okay, I'm going to homeschool. There was a big surge of that, particularly more even this year. But we probably do not need a fifth high school. We need to realign some students, some enrollment size, because we have Mount Whitney is much smaller than Redwood. Redwood is ballooned. Maybe we need to look at why that is. We have students at Redwood who aren't even from the area that they're supposed to be. We've had these magnet things. We've had academies that we try to encourage. I don't think that they've done what we thought they were going to do. I think the academy mindset probably needs to be applied more generally to all 4 high schools, rather than, okay, only at this one or only that one. We need to, because again, it's career readiness, it's job readiness, as well as college readiness. And so that's a great question. How to use that money? I think we need to look at it very, very carefully, and we need to stay right in as intended by the voters. I also heard it said, and they said it well, that money and what the Visalia Unified does with it or doesn't is going to affect future bond measures for other things. COS has a bond measure floating right now. The hospital has bond measures, and as they need to, and that's raising taxes, because that's where it comes from property taxes. As those things come up, we need to be very frugal, very honest about what needs to be done and how we handle it.
Very good. So I wanted to ask you about an issue that's come up in the last couple of weeks. Now, you recently declined an invitation from the Visalia Unified Teachers Association, or VUDA, to interview for their endorsement. As a result, there's been a thought, I think, from some of those teachers or some of those union representatives that you and a couple of others are actually anti-teacher. Are you anti-teacher?
I declared that loud and clear at the board meeting Tuesday night because I felt like I couldn't stay silent. I am not a teacher hater. I have been married to one for 44 years. He's taught at Visalia Unified for 17. My sister-in-law is a teacher. My daughter-in-law is a teacher. I know dozens of teachers. I am a teacher, though not at Visalia Unified. I am not a teacher hater. It was groping at straws, I think. How can we blacklist this candidate and others? Well, we'll just say they're teacher haters. It was very inappropriate. There are people who now have heard about it. I haven't heard from them, but I understand that in their hearing, they're going, well, wait a minute, that shouldn't be happening. So I hope that the rhetoric gets dialed back. I would like to see that even that union rep that stated that at the school that my wife teaches at would apologize, because it was out of order. That it's libel, it's venomous. It's not sticking to issues and reality. It is, unfortunately, it is by association. There are people who are teacher haters. I don't associate with them, and I don't take money from them either.
Why did you decline the invitation to go meet with VUDA?
It's possible that I made a mistake, Jimmy, by not going, but I declined the invitation because I didn't think they really wanted to hear from me. They already were backing the other guy, and so I thought, well, okay, they're going to back the other guy. If they're interviewing me, is it just to find out what they could argue about with me, or? So I didn't think it was a friendly audience. I didn't know if it would be unbiased. You know, I know the union president. I mean, we know each other's names. We're acquaintances. We don't know each other well. I would hope that I could always work with the union, but I would be very strong to say the union needs to stay in its lane. Its lane is to look after its members and membership. That means they need to look at working conditions and finances and salaries and benefits, and those are the things but not dictating what is taught in the classroom, not dictating curriculum. That seems to be what's happening, particularly from the California Teachers Association, and it trickles down. They spend millions of dollars in politics and influence. That should not be in the classroom. That should not be allowed to be an influence in the classroom. It should be, oh man, that money should be going to helping teachers do their job better, helping improve them, helping to, it shouldn't be spent in trying to wield power.
If you had it to do over again, would you do something differently?
Well, I try not to second guess myself too much. I have a tendency to do that anyway, but I might have gone. I might have gone and just sit down with them, and particularly if it would have fended off this horrendous criticism, because apparently if I had showed up, then maybe I could have disproved before it was unproved and stated as a lie that I was a teacher hater.
So I think what I hear you saying is that your issue was more with the union leadership than with the rank and file teacher. If there's a teacher out there who is, sorry, I muted you while I'm asking the question, But if there are teachers out there who maybe said, you know what, these are my people, these are the ones who represent me, I kind of feel like you slapped me in the face a little bit by not at least pursuing the endorsement of those who represent the teachers. What would you say to that teacher right now?
I would say that I am 100% behind you as a teacher. Although I will always say parents are more the number one influence of students than teachers. But the teachers are right next to it. For most of my wife's careers, by this time, we're almost in October, her students start referring to her as mom. More recently, they're referring to her as grandma. That's not making her feel very young, but there is an endearment that happens naturally from students when they are connecting with their teachers. The teachers are the apps. Without them, there is no education. 100%, I want them to understand. I will always back teachers. And I will back the union doing its proper job for teachers. But if connecting to a union means I'm beholden to them, or I have to, have strings pulled, I best have no connection to the union, one way or another. But like I said, if my appearance to those interview time would have allayed their targets, their darts, then I probably should have. But definitely, teachers know this. I'm not against you. I'm not against the union. I want to work well with both, but I will always push for teachers to be able to do their best and their most creative.
Yeah. So I have a couple questions left. I'm looking at the clock and we're running right up against 8 o'clock. So I guess the first thing I would ask you is if you do have a few minutes to continue.
Yeah.
And then the second thing I would ask is if there's anyone online who does want to get a question in, go ahead and throw it in there, and I'll definitely pause my questioning for those who are out there in the group. But seeing none right this second, I would ask you, you mentioned parents and you talked about, go ahead, Paul.
Well, I did see Carrie, I think that's who it was. She actually put her name on there, asked the question earlier about Narcan at every classroom. And you're absolutely right. I mean, we don't have the first aid kits in the nurse's office, right? We have it at every classroom. So that's not a bad idea, it being very proactive.
Oh, classroom. Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you this. You mentioned parents and kind of that parent-teacher dynamic, who the important role of a teacher, obviously, in a student's education, but then there's also the role of the parent. What role as parents and families, maybe it's grandparents or community members or whatever, but what role do parents have in public education?
Oh, man. I think they're the first place. They're the first priority because they're their students. I'll never forget a principal once said to my wife and I, we're the professionals. We know how to raise your children. And my jaw dropped. That was 30 years ago. I don't think that's become rampant, but it's still murmuring in some educational circles where they think that they're more equipped to be parents. I'm sorry. I will always say parents are the first priority in the influence of their children, and we need to listen to them first and foremost. And they should have every bit. That's why on my, I'll do a little blurb on my little handouts that I give people. The very first thing is parent voice, parent choice. Without that, we don't have school. There's no reason for school to function if we don't take into account everything that parents dynamically should be involved with and give influence to, and say, hey, I need to see this. I'd like to see that. I want to be that. Not just have a parent-teacher conference once a year. And sometimes that's all the interaction they have. We need to encourage more and more input. And also, you don't just announce, oh, if you want to see what's in the curriculum, you can come down to the district office and have a look. No, parents should be involved in the selection of the curriculum. Parents should be involved and actively be able to have resource, actively have an opportunity to look at it, not at one place at one time for a certain number of hours. That's intimidation. That's That's a barrier. That's one of the things I want to make sure we break down. Communication has to be clear and concise and operate and actually living. It doesn't, oh, no, we're past that. That was last week. No, it's ongoing every day, all the time. It may wear us out. Parents do have that tendency to wear out educators, but that's okay. Parents should never feel like the teacher or an educator or administrator has taken their place. It's not their place to do that. It's a co-op. It's a cooperative. And so we need to do everything possible to bring that confidence back so that parents feel like, you know what, I really am involved and engaged in what's happening with my student.
Very good. I, for some reason, am not seeing all of the comments that are on here. My wonderful wife, Marilyn, just brought me her phone, and apparently there's a few questions that are on Facebook that I was not seeing live. So I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of rapid fire get through a couple of these. I can't put them up on screen like I did the others, but I'm gonna just read through them. So first of all, from Sherry Toole asks, what can parents expect from you if elected? Will you be transparent with parents about what is happening within the schools?
Absolutely, totally, 100%. I actually like to be 110%. That's what Jimmy and I were talking about earlier with this newsletter that I want to do monthly, which scares me to death. But and maybe even we could do other things like this. I could actually do chat involvement, and we've all learned how to work Zoom, haven't we? But absolutely, there needs to be a constant flow of information and even working on things. It doesn't have to come glitzy and all packaged and here's our 5 points and this is how we're going to walk through it and here's our timeline. That's predetermined, and I see that a lot in education. They said, we're going to have a brainstorm. I teach brainstorming as well. We're going to have a brainstorming session. Here's the categories, and here's what to choose from. That's not brainstorming. Brainstorming is allowing any idea, good and bad. There's no judgment. You throw it all out there. It doesn't matter whether it sticks or not. It's just that brainstorming needs to be everyone's engaged and involved and allowed to share whatever thought and idea they have. And that needs to be what a school district is like. That's what I'm like. And I'm ready to say, oh, that wasn't a good idea. I'm sorry I was going that way. You're going to have a better idea. Let's do that. And then we build teamwork, and we build coaching opportunities that we come alongside and said, okay, here's how we're going to get there. Oh, I can't hear you.
I said I muted you too quickly. What was the last thing that you said?
Oh, I probably said, we're going to put
just a few words.
Put teamwork together and coaching opportunities, and here's how we're going to get there. Oh, I also said, I am first to admit, if I had come up with an idea that doesn't work, let's take your better one. Let's go with that.
Excellent. So you kind of answered the second question from Sherry. She said, will you be available to parents' questions and inquiries? I think that's exactly what you're talking about through the newsletter and through other avenues and means of being able to do that. We have another question in here. This actually two questions from Joseph Beaton. First one being, do we need online tutoring to fix academic decline caused by online learning?
That's what I said earlier, that I felt like, I don't know. I think it's an enormous amount of money that they are shelling out for 4th through 12th grade. That, if it can be an augmentation, okay, but I don't think it needs to be quite as robust, expensive as it is. But I agree. I think online is how we got here. It has been a detriment to students really flowering and growing. I'm looking for, and will always look for, what's the best. I think it's always in-person is the best, and more in-person is even better, and in-person tutoring is the maximum. And so I understand that in some areas, some school sites, depending on the monies that they have in their budget, they are paying for in-person teacher tutoring. Although some of it's still by Zoom. I'm going, no, in-person means in person. It helps a little bit because you have the connection, perhaps, but still, I think we need to do all we can to keep bringing in person, and we make the online just supplemental stuff. Not it can't be the fix all. I agree. It got us here.
So the second question from Mr. Beaton was, has Juan Guerrero agreed to debate Paul Belt? Do you know of anything that's going to be along those lines?
Yeah, come Tuesday night. Come Tuesday night at Cafe 210, or we just call it 210 these days now. The Chamber of Commerce and the Sun Gazette are co-sponsoring a candidate forum. My understanding is Juan Guerrero will be there. I will be there. I've heard all the candidates are going to be in present. So that will be it'll be a full evening for a lot of airing to happen.
So, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, that is this Tuesday night, the 4th of October at the 210 Cafe from 5 to 7 o'clock in the evening, and tickets are required. So if you want to attend that's going to be in person. It's not an online forum. To my knowledge, but if you do want to attend, because space will be limited, you need to go to the Chamber of Commerce Visalia's website and get your free tickets. It's not anything that costs to attend, but you do need to register and get tickets. And so if you want to attend, you can go to the Chamber of Commerce for Visalia's website and pick up those tickets there.
Well said. That's exactly it. And I think it only seats like 200 people, so that's why it has to be ticketed.
So I think the last thing, unless we get some more questions that I wanted to ask you about, well, I've got a couple more, but one of the ones I want to ask is, you've been pretty vocal. In fact, I think you started out your campaign really being vocal about some college and career readiness statistics that really paint a negative picture of VUSD. Now, you have had some critics that have pointed out that these numbers that you're citing are inaccurate, and that you should retract your criticism. How do you respond to that?
Well, I've heard often in educational circles that the data drives the policies and the systems. The data is an error, apparently. And I was pointing out off the cuff, I was at a meeting where I was asked, why am I running for school board? And it came to my mind. It kind of went a little bit, what do you call it, when viral, when something takes off. But it was very real. And if the numbers are wrong, which I have every reason to think they are, but the state data stated this extremely low number of graduates from Golden West who were able to meet the requirements for UC or CSU entrance. And I was appalled at that. And so I pointed that out. Well, I had people angry that I was spurting out lies. I had one person so angry with me because I was defaming the scholars at Golden West. I said nothing about the wonderful scholarship of well-deserved students who have worked hard and earned scholarships. I was just looking at the data, and the data is a mess. Now, how did that happen is a big question. How did the state of California get the wrong numbers from Visalia Unified? Was it just a keystroke? Well, we've been told that after September 1st, those numbers were supposed to be updated. We're now almost to October 1st. They're still the same. Now, the district has put forth some numbers. They're still very low. They're still like in the 30 to 40 percentile. And so I pushed hard. I said, I think we should have at least a 75 to 80% goal. Well, a few weeks ago, the school board jumped, or not the school board, mostly I think the superintendent, though he's giving credit to the school board, they jumped it higher than that. They have now made a goal, 100% of graduates from Visalia Unified School, high schools, will be career or college ready. That's an admirable goal. I'm all for it. I don't know if it's realistic, but it's a lot better than 40%. It's what? It's 2.5 times more. Talk about. I want the expectations raised. They just need to have a little dose of reality too.
Sure. Fair enough. One other question that I had here, as a board trustee, it's going to be your job to craft and adopt various policies for the district. How do you balance the needs of one group against the competing needs of another? And I'll give you an example. So as an example, when a policy is proposed that would allow a student to use the restroom or locker room that corresponds with their gender expression, you're faced with two sets of conflicting rights, right? You've got the rights of the transgender student or the transgender female to use the restroom of their choosing, but you've also got the rights of the biological female to not have to share a locker room with biological males. How do you approach crafting policy that can satisfy the needs of both groups?
Well, and also a third component there, Jimmy, is the legal ramifications. That there have been some incredible laws passed in the state of California, particularly, that says you must accommodate these gender choices. But I'll go back to the data. The data should drive the policy, and then thereby the systems and the practice carrying that out. What's the percentage of transgenderism in Visalia Unified School District? I am pretty sure it's 1% or less. And so I think that it's not necessarily two opposing views. It's one small view and the greater good of the rest. And I would say very clearly, we can accommodate. There is either a nurse's restroom or a staff restroom on site that they can use that one, since it's their choice to want to use but biological. I would say biological genders need to use the biological restrooms, except for the unisex one that will allow, but it's going to have one stall, one door that locks, and it will be used for probably the half student that's on the site or not on the site that wants to do.
It's like we froze up again. I'm going to give this a second to let you come back here. It's happened twice before, and it was fairly quick. There it is.
There we go. Did it catch me at there? The 99%. I know, it just came back, honey. My wife's telling me in the other room. The 99% do not need to be displaced or embarrassed or have their rights infringed upon for the 1%. That doesn't make any sense. We don't really live in a democracy. And when we talk about equity, where's the equity in making the 99% uncomfortable, unsafe, indecent exposure that used to be a law? I think it still is. So we will lean, if you will, to the indecency laws and say, no, we cannot allow the wrong gender biologically to be in the wrong restroom biologically. We'll accommodate, we'll allow a site that's private for them to go in and out of. They don't need to be exposed or being there's another word. They don't need to be exposing, and the others don't need to be exposed to their infringing on their privacy.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, what you're saying is your approach to situations like that would be to set policy based on the majority and make accommodations based on the minority in a situation like that where there's such a drastic difference between minority and majority.
Absolutely, because what I heard said recently is that there are some new restrooms being built someplace in Visalia Unified, and they're going to make them half and half. Half for gender specific and half for gender choice. We don't have 50% of the students that need the trans accommodation. So that's a misuse of funds. That's it's a recipe for disaster, that we're actually going to force people to be exposed and to allow exposing when it shouldn't happen. That's called decency laws, and we will side on decency. We will affirm equality.
So that segues into, I guess, my next and probably final question. And that is that As a board trustee, you have a responsibility to several different groups of people, right? You have a responsibility to the people who elect you, your constituents, obviously. You have a responsibility to the children who are in the district, to the parents, to the teachers, but also to governmental agencies like Sacramento and Washington, D.C. And so there are laws, and I think you referenced a couple of them. And if we just stick with the transgender issue for a second, there are laws that have been, or rulings or edicts or mandates or whatever we want to call them, that have come down from both Sacramento and Washington, D.C., that are requiring districts to do things like allow children to use the restroom or locker room of their gender expression, or requiring schools to put things like tampon dispensers in the boys' bathrooms and locker rooms. So when I hear you talk about the way you approach policy, when that conflicts with what's coming down from Sacramento or what's coming down from Washington, D.C., how do you, as a local board member, balance those accountabilities, I guess, that you have to different groups of people?
Well, I think as you lined that out, first and foremost, our accountability are to the parents and the community, the local community. And it's not to Sacramento or Washington, D.C., unless, like we said, in our course of duties, there are things that they have mandated we look after. Finances, school safety. There are specific laws and things that we have to be accountable. We're the gatekeepers on many different things, particularly in finances and making sure that oversight is done properly. But when it comes to the nonsensical, I guess I'll say that. I'll go ahead and say it. When things don't make sense, it's not common sense. I will stand, even if I'm the only one. Even if I vote no on something that everybody else says, well, you have to do this. Just like the tampon dispensers, I haven't yet to see that there's a law that we have to have them. I saw that it was encapsulated, if you will, in this accommodation thing. We need to make them available for those who may need them. Well, that doesn't mean you put them in every biological male's restroom. If that's the law, I'm going to sound very loudly to our local legislators and say, hey, you guys need to change things in Sacramento. I don't think it is. But it doesn't make sense. It's a waste of time and money. And I think I heard that in Tulare not too long ago, the boys are having a grand old time playing with those tampons. That's not what they're supposed to be for either.
Yeah, very good. Well, I have a few more questions, but for the sake of time, I'm not going to ask them. Paul, do you have any final thoughts or anything that you want to leave people with as we end this candidate spotlight?
Well, like I said, I am a former preacher, so it's you got to be careful.
Keep it to a couple minutes here.
So in closing, which means absolutely nothing, I have tried to be very specific about what can be done. I also want to make sure that people understand I'm not trying to be against the person in this Area 2 seat currently. He's a nice enough guy. He really is. We've had good exchanges. I just think it's time. It's not only time for change. It's time, at least from my perspective, that I step up. I have this compulsion to do it. It's not like it's something like my lifelong dream is at 66 to go on the school board. It will change a lot of dynamics in my life. But I know that I'm prepared from all of my past. I am made for this. One of my sons actually said that as I did a little polling of all of my children, my family. What do you guys think if I run for school board? I did that back in May and June. And one of my sons said, Dad, this is what you've always done. You have people listen to each other. You bring people together. He didn't know that what he was also saying is what I teach in our personality profiles that we do in our supervisory academy. I'm a blue, and as a blue, I want unity and harmony. I want people to actually respect one another, even though they don't agree on things. And we come together for a common goal, and we walk it through. So that's why I am for filling our academic gaps. I am for parents' voice and parents' choice. I want to see use of tax dollars wisely. I want to see that we keep politics out of the classroom, and that school safety is pushed forward, and we end divisive curriculum as well. That means anything that is really not needed, then let's not use it.
Well, very good. Ladies and gentlemen, Paul Belt. Paul, I want to thank you for joining us here tonight. I want to thank you for being candid. And this interview will be available probably until the end of time or the end of YouTube. We're not going to edit it. We're not going to cut it down or remove it after, a certain period of time. So we did this knowing that we would have a group of people who were going to be on here tonight, and probably a bigger group of people who will watch this later. So the hope is that that you've been able to hear from Paul. You've been able to kind of hear his heart, his positions, and have a little bit better idea of whether or not he deserves your vote. So again, thank you, Paul, and we greatly appreciate your time here tonight.
Thanks, Jimmy.
All right, we'll talk to you later. And again, I do want to make mention that you will not get opposing views unless we have the opposition agree to come on and do a candidate spotlight with us. But you do have an opportunity, if you live in Visalia, to hear all the candidates at the Chamber of Commerce candidate forum that's happening this Tuesday. So again, just to repeat, if you would like to attend that, go to the website for the Visalia Chamber of Commerce. There will be a link there to the candidate forum, and you can get your free tickets sent to you, assuming that there are seats still available. So that's it for us tonight. We do have some more of these coming up. We have not just the one tonight, but we have our next one's going to be Jesse. Where's he at? Jesse Perez is going to be coming up. There he is on the screen right there. We will be doing this Sunday night at 7 o'clock. Jesse is representing Area 1, or hoping to represent Area 1. He's the candidate there running against the incumbent. We also have a candidate out of Area 6, which is Janelle Murphy. She's going to be on with us Monday, October 3rd. So that's this next coming Monday. Again, she represents Area 6. So 7 o'clock Monday, you can join us and ask questions of her as well. And then finally, we will have Crystal Reynolds, who is hoping to represent Area 4. She will be on with us on Thursday, so 1 week from tonight, on October 6th, 7 o'clock. So come on in and be ready to ask questions and get to know these candidates. Outside of that, we will see you Sunday night. So thank you for joining us for this candidate spotlight.